Have you ever wondered what your voice says about you? Our voice is a deeply personal and profoundly powerful part of who we are. It doesn't just deliver words. It carries the essence of our identity, the echoes of our experiences, and the culture that has shaped us. Every inflection, every cadence, every pause tells a story, one that begins in childhood and evolves over a lifetime. From the lullabies we heard as infants to the slang we picked up in school, from the accents of our parents to the professional tone we adopt at work, our voice is a living record of where we've been and who we've become. For some, this connection between voice and identity is a source of pride. A regional accent might be worn like a badge of honor, a symbol of roots and belonging. Imagine a person with a distinct southern drawl or a lilting Irish brogue who feels their voice ties them to their community and heritage. Their way of speaking becomes a point of connection, an invitation for others to share in their world. Yet for others, their voice can feel like a burden. A heavy accent or an unusual speech pattern might make them feel out of place in certain settings, leading them to modify the way they speak to fit in or avoid judgment. This struggle between embracing and adapting our voices highlights the complex relationship we have with language. While our voice is a tool for expression and connection, it's also subject to the biases and assumptions of others. Consider the non-native English speaker who is hesitant to speak up in meetings, fearing their accent will overshadow the content of their ideas. Or think about the individual with a speech impediment who faces unwarranted assumptions about their intelligence or capability. These challenges remind us that while our voice can be a source of power, it can also become a source of vulnerability. Understanding the power of our voice means acknowledging both its strengths and its limitations. It's not just about how we speak, but also about how we're heard. Our voice can open doors, commanding attention and inspiring trust, but it can also close them when biases and stereotypes get in the way. Imagine a job interview where a candidate's qualifications are overlooked because their accent doesn't match the interviewer's preconceived notions of professionalism. Or think about a social situation where someone's tone of voice is misinterpreted as aloof or aggressive, creating a barrier to connection. These biases are not insurmountable. By becoming aware of the judgments tied to language, we can begin to dismantle them, not only in how we judge others, but also in how we perceive ourselves. Recognizing the value of our unique voice, regardless of its quirks or origins, is a step toward empowerment. It's about embracing the idea that our way of speaking, with all its individuality, adds to the richness of human diversity. In many ways, our voice is more than just a sound. It's a form of expression that bridges the inner world of thought and feeling with the external world of communication and connection. Think about a moment when you truly felt heard, when someone not only listened to your words, but also understood your tone, your emotions, your intent. That moment was shaped by the way you use your voice and the way the listener responded to it. Speech, at its best, is not just about delivering information. It's about forging understanding. The voice as identity. Imagine meeting someone new. Before they've shared much about themselves, their voice speaks volumes. Their accent might hint at where they're from. Their choice of words might suggest their education or social background. Even subtle factors like pitch or cadence can influence your perception of their personality. Are they confident, nervous, warm, cold? In many ways, our voice is our identity. It's the first impression we make when we open our mouths, and it's deeply tied to our sense of self. Just think about how we can feel uncomfortable hearing a recording of our own voice. That reaction often stems from the disconnect between how we think we sound and how others perceive us. Accents are one of the most obvious markers of identity, but they are far from neutral. For example, a person with a Southern American accent might be perceived as warm and friendly in one context, yet as less competent or educated in another. unfair stereotypes that reveal the biases built into our perceptions of language. Meanwhile, a British accent in the United States might be seen as sophisticated or intellectual. These perceptions aren't rooted in the inherent qualities of the accents themselves, but in the cultural associations we've learned to make. Take, for instance, the idea of prestige accents versus regional accents. In many countries, certain ways of speaking are elevated as the standard, often associated with power, education, or wealth. In the United States, the newscaster accent is often considered neutral or professional, while regional accents like those from Appalachia or the Bronx may carry stigmas. Similarly, in England, the received pronunciation, RP, also known as the Queen's English, is often seen as a marker of high status, while a Cockney accent might carry connotations of working-class roots. These perceptions shape not just how we view others, but how we view ourselves. For someone with a stigmatized accent, the social judgments tied to their way of speaking can lead to self-doubt or even a conscious effort to change their voice. This is especially evident in professional settings where individuals may feel pressured to adopt a neutral or standard accent to be taken seriously. The effort to conform linguistically can create an internal conflict, as people feel they are suppressing a vital part of their identity to fit societal expectations. For instance, a young woman from the southern United States entering a corporate environment in New York City might find herself softening her drawl or eliminating certain regional phrases. She may feel that her natural voice, one that reflects her upbringing, family, and culture, is perceived as a liability rather than an asset. This isn't just a matter of pronunciation or vocabulary. It's about how deeply intertwined our voices are with our sense of who we are. Cultural associations with language often extend to gender and race as well. A high-pitched voice in women might be perceived as less authoritative, while deeper voices in men are often linked to strength and competence. These biases, though often subconscious, shape how opportunities are distributed and whose voices are amplified in discussions of leadership and power. Even names can have a vocal impact. Think of the difference in how a name like Mohammed might be received versus Michael. Studies show that people often make assumptions about a person's character, background, or even abilities based solely on the sound of their name, a phenomenon rooted in the same biases that influence how we perceive accents. But there's also a flip side. Voices can connect us in powerful ways. Consider how comforting it is to hear the familiar tone of a loved one on the phone, or how certain accents evoke fond memories or cultural pride. A voice can carry history, tradition, and emotion in ways that are hard to articulate but deeply felt. Think about a parent reading a bedtime story to their child. The sound of their voice, with its unique cadence and warmth, becomes a source of security and love. Or consider the emotional impact of hearing a speaker with a shared accent or dialect, how it can immediately create a sense of community and belonging. In these moments, our voices transcend their functional role as tools of communication and become vessels of connection and meaning. Understanding the complexities of voice as identity requires us to confront our biases and reflect on the ways we assign value to different ways of speaking. It calls for an acknowledgement that no voice is inherently superior to another, and that diversity in how we speak enriches our world rather than diminishes it. The biases tied to language run deeper than we often realize, influencing not only professional opportunities and personal relationships, but also our broader perceptions of trust, intelligence, and competence. These biases are insidious because they operate on both conscious and subconscious levels, often slipping past our awareness and subtly shaping our judgments. They reveal the extent to which language, far from being a neutral tool of communication, is a powerful social force. Consider the hiring process again. When a candidate with a non-native accent is interviewed, their voice may inadvertently signal outsider to the listener. This might lead to assumptions about their ability to fit in with the company culture or even their intelligence, despite clear evidence of their qualifications. The listener might not even recognize these biases consciously, as they've been ingrained through societal stereotypes and cultural conditioning. The same candidate could have an impeccable resume, extensive experience, and glowing recommendations, yet their accent alone could become an invisible hurdle. In personal relationships, the role of linguistic bias can be equally profound. Imagine a scenario where one partner comes from a culture that values indirect communication, while the other comes from a culture that prizes straightforwardness. The indirect communicator might use subtle hints or deferential language to express their needs, which could be perceived by their partner as evasive or lacking confidence. Conversely, the straightforward communicator might be seen as blunt or insensitive. These differences in speech patterns are not inherently problematic, but when filtered through our biases, they can create unnecessary tension. Tone, pitch, and style also play a crucial role in how we interpret others. A woman with a high-pitched voice may be viewed as less authoritative in professional settings, despite her expertise or leadership skills. This bias reflects deeply ingrained gender stereotypes, where authority and competence are often associated with traits culturally coded as masculine, such as a deeper voice or more assertive delivery. Men, too, are not exempt from these biases. A man with a soft-spoken tone might be unfairly judged as weak or lacking leadership qualities, even if his actions and decisions prove otherwise. The consequences of these biases are far-reaching. They don't just affect how we perceive individuals, they also influence how we interact with entire groups. A study once showed that people are more likely to believe information presented in an accent similar to their own. This tendency has profound implications for politics, media, and education, where trust and credibility are critical. When leaders or educators speak in a way that aligns with the linguistic expectations of their audience, they are more likely to persuade and inspire. Conversely, when there is a mismatch, their message might be unfairly discounted. Yet, there is also a hopeful side to understanding these biases. Recognizing them is the first step toward dismantling them. When we become aware of how we unconsciously judge others based on how they speak, we can begin to challenge those assumptions. In hiring, this might mean focusing on the content of a candidate's answers rather than the accent in which they are delivered. In relationships, it might involve making a conscious effort to understand a partner's communication style rather than defaulting to frustration. At a societal level, addressing linguistic bias requires a cultural shift. It means valuing linguistic diversity as a strength rather than a deficit. It means celebrating the richness of different accents, dialects, and speech patterns, rather than forcing conformity to a narrow standard. Some companies and organizations are already taking steps in this direction, offering training to help employees recognize and counteract linguistic biases.